Well, good morning to you once again. We continue on with Tuesday's discussions, and this morning we also want to look into the element of business when it comes to empowering Africa's entrepreneurial ecosystem, bridging the gap in entrepreneurial coaching. Now, you get to look at the backbone of it. Africa is definitely a fast becoming global hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. A few weeks ago here, we displayed to you one of the innovators that has created a very interesting app that can actually help give security to different communities here in Uganda. Now, while that is a transformative web, it's gaining momentum. It reveals a critical void in the market as well, the pressing need for widespread and accessible entrepreneurship coaching. In the vast and dynamic landscape of Africa, a transformative opportunity awaits entrepreneurs of every nature seeking to make their mark in a region ripe with untapped potential. However, amidst this burgeoning spirit of innovation and ambition by the young people, there exists a critical gap that demands attention, and this gap is the absence of widespread and accessible entrepreneurial coaching. Entrepreneurial coaching holds the key to unlocking Africa's untapped potential. Well, we are joined by an entrepreneur coach all the way from Pretoria, South Africa, and her name is Elona. Good morning to you, Elona.
Regina, thank you for having me, and good morning Uganda.
It's a pleasure to have you in Morning at NTV. My name is Priscilla. Now, Elona, we want to first understand what is entrepreneurial coaching and how is it different from the other modes of coaching pre-existing?
Okay, entrepreneurial coaching is an intervention where a coach basically provides either one-on-one or group support to entrepreneurs or small business owners through an intervention that gives improvement in the individual entrepreneur and also in the entity that they're trying to grow. So in the individual entrepreneur, we work with, for example, working with self-confidence, resilience. We know entrepreneurs need a lot of that. Working with how they envision their business in the future and how they communicate with stakeholders, for example. Then when it comes to the entity, now you're speaking technical business skills like your financial management, your marketing, your sales, all those critical skills for small business development.
Okay, all right. What's the significance of that in relation to the potential that Africa has and also the other world?
Look, Africa tops the statistics globally in the not so positive things, such as high unemployment rate, and entrepreneurship comes as a solution for the high poverty rates, high unemployment rates. However, despite so many small businesses, so many people with great ideas, so many people who are problem solvers, there is a gap where there are businesses that are started, but the high failure rate comes into play. So if you can plug in entrepreneurial coaching to support the entrepreneur and bridge that gap from inception of the business to sustainable growth, that is, I think if you save one business, you save quite a lot more people in terms of livelihood. So entrepreneurial coaching comes as a bolster to support entrepreneurship in bridging the poverty and high unemployment rate across Africa.
Okay, all right. I know that there's a lot of potential for, young people, innovators, and people that are coming up with all these smart ideas. But then again, when it comes to their appreciation of coaching, for young people, they believe that they can do bad all by themselves. In your capacity, how have you been able to transform their mindset to appreciate that entrepreneurial coaching ought to be a part of the process that they take to become gurus?
Look, I think they've got to realize that they need it, and sometimes it's through experience. So you're very nascent and new entrepreneurs, yes, they can do that all by themselves. And we actually encourage that. Go out there, get the experience. Sometimes you get the failure, you get your hands burnt, and then you recognize you need support. There's nothing as ineffective as forcing an intervention on somebody that doesn't feel they need it, because you will frustrate the entrepreneur, possibly frustrate their innovation process, and also frustrate yourself as a coach. So I think there are some processes that every individual needs to go through their creative process, and when they do feel they need it, perhaps let's make it available and not force it on those who still feel I can do it, because perhaps they can at that stage.
You have talked about experience, and while we have this conversation, we would like to know what has been your experience of actually adopting coaching to yourself in the businesses that you do and the things that you do, and how has that quickly elevated you and made you stand out in the fields?
I think a unique combination, which has been validated scientifically, is that when you do either or, you develop the individual and you leave the entity behind, then you have a very well-balanced, emotionally balanced, confident individual who perhaps still lacks the business skills, and then we have a gap. However, when you combine the two, empower the entrepreneur as an individual, empower the organization, and also in terms of how you sequence it. So I work at a university, Tshwane University of Technology, and we've been working for the last 4 or 5 years on validating a methodology of what do you start with. Do you start the entrepreneur on some complicated financial management workshop, and you don't know if they have the confidence to even sit through that workshop, what's going on in their mind? Or do you start off with coaching the individual and then eventually coach the entity? So a lot of different approaches work depending on where the entrepreneur is, and it's important to use a validated methodology, because just throwing in every intervention doesn't always work.
Okay. Elona, while this is a good initiative and it's very necessary for entrepreneurs to actually pick up coaching, when you look at the availability of quality coaching on the African continent, I think we still have a limitation in the greater part of Africa. We do have limitation in coaches, we do have limitation in the concept of coaching, and as you have said, developing the person as well as developing their startup or their business or whatever it is that they want to actually grow themselves in. So when you compare these to the other developed countries, we have a huge gap there. We can more or less say that this is a very, very baby concept on the African continent. What will it take for us to actually have entrepreneurs across the bar embrace this sooner than later to be able to catch up and match up with the globe?
I think one of our mistakes is forgetting the context in which the entrepreneurs and the coaches must work. I think an African solution, a Pan-African solution for Pan-African coaches is necessary. Even if you look at the SADC region, you do need to adapt things from one country to the other. And that is the one thing that we've also just launched a program on entrepreneurial coaching that takes into account the context of the entrepreneur, the context in which they want to trade, and also what is their lived reality if you're going to work with them as a coach. So what I'm saying is it's important for coaches across the African region to start to explore Africa-produced programs for upskilling themselves as entrepreneurial coaches, and that becomes a local solution for a local problem. Yes, we are globally minded, but if the entrepreneur is operating at African and regional areas, it is necessary that we are schooled on entrepreneurship from an African context. So I know you're saying we are still emerging as Africa. Actually, when it comes to entrepreneurial coaching, I will say globally, it's an emerging field, because we have had to differentiate how do we coach a small business owner, an informal business owner, as compared to a business leader that has a corporate board and so much more resources than your small business owners do.
Okay, let's talk about the unique challenges that an African entrepreneur is going to face from navigating markets, the infrastructure barriers, the limitation in policy coverage from corner to corner of the African continent. What are other challenges, and if you can dive deeper into also those particular challenges, and what could be the solutions around them, or how is entrepreneurship coaching a solution to these barriers?
I think one of the main things, if you ask an entrepreneur today, is what do I need? And most of them will say I need finance, right?
Yeah.
But if you dig deeper, if I fund your business today and you don't have a market, so you have a well-funded, well-kitted business, but you still don't have clients, I think one of the keys to unlock the growth of small businesses is, yes, develop them, coach them, but also give them access to market. You will find that most of our businesses that we have been coaching, they start off saying, I need R1 million or I need $100,000 or whatever for my business. But at the end of the coaching program, you find them saying, rather give me clients, because then they can actually raise that money themselves. They create jobs, and they actually self-sustain. However, the other problems is that lack of self-awareness, lack of business skills, lack of access to information. Yet we say we're living in a global village. You'll be surprised at how much in silos we operate, where you will find you have one area that has an oversupply of a certain product, and then the next country has a shortage. But that SME doesn't ever think to go beyond their own borders to say, perhaps I need to connect with another SME in my region, because there is a possibility to trade. So I think there's a lack of skills, lack of funding, but at a certain point, not really for your startups. We need to open access to market a bit more. Not even a bit more, a lot more. Access to market will provide those businesses. You've given them the skills, they've got a great business model. Who do they trade with? Are we opening ways to say, for our corporates, can you have a portion of your supply chain that is dedicated to small business owners, and we give you entrepreneurs that have been coached, entrepreneurs that are compliant and meet your requirements, and what they're needing is for you to give them access to market. We need to be having a lot more of those conversations, as opposed to that most SMEs cannot sustain a market. Most of those SMEs are not well supported.
Okay, Elona, at the end of the day, of course, we have to look at how we can bolster the economy in different parts of the continent. How can we bolster the ecosystem that you were talking about, that nurtures that bubbling entrepreneur that is holistic in nature, to be able to then produce a holistic business service product that can be traded across and have impact on our continent?
I think, look, one of the major problems is that we all work in silos. We're all developing the economy in silos. So, for example, policy could be developed in isolation and not keeping in mind the small businesses that actually provide most of the employment in the economy. Then policy becomes a barrier to that entrepreneur growing, that entrepreneur creating 10 more, 15 more, 20 more jobs. We have infrastructure that is built and sometimes not very accessible to small businesses. So I think if the conversation is more inclusive and actually an ecosystem, and if we think of an ecosystem, it is a system that works together and is interdependent and intersupportive. If we start to look at how can the various players in the economy that impacts the growth of business, small businesses and eventually big businesses, how can they work better together to make it an environment that is favorable for the development of the small businesses in that economy and across the borders as well?
Okay, all right. In your closing remarks, it's been very enlightful to have this conversation with you. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the opportunities of empowering Africa's entrepreneurial ecosystem.
So in my closing remarks, I think it is not something that we need to be talking to as a distant dream, to say our governments need to talk to each other. Our governments do talk to each other. Our governments have collaborative efforts, but it somehow stops somewhere at the top. As an entrepreneurial coach, what do I bring to the table to the entrepreneur? What stakeholders, what relationships can I introduce the entrepreneurs to? It starts with the one-on-one support that we're giving entrepreneurs. So at grassroots level, we can already start to create those ecosystems, empower the entrepreneur to create their own ecosystem, to create a value chain. If they're not part of an established value chain, why not build the relationship building skills and create value chains, create markets for themselves, as opposed to waiting to say, I'm hoping to get included in that market. So there is a two-pronged approach to say it's important to also empower the entrepreneurs to say, how can you create opportunities? The ones that you're trying to receive or waiting to receive, can you perhaps create those opportunities through relationship building and innovative ways that have not been done? Because we do say entrepreneurs are risk takers and they're innovative. So how can they use those innovative skills to also develop their own ecosystems?
Well, thank you so much, Elona, and your wisdom has been very insightful. I trust that the business entrepreneur community here in Uganda has actually picked up a leaf or two. Good day to you.
Thank you very much.
All right.